Hello, folks, and welcome to my attempt, my probably ridiculously overly optimistic attempt at trying to recreate in Flight Simulator one of the most historically significant events in aviation ever, and that is the inaugural flight of the China Clipper Pan American flying boat across the Pacific Ocean from San Francisco Bay to Manila in the Philippines. This flight, there are so many reasons why this flight is as historically significant as it is, and I had originally planned to give you a whole history of that, but look, I'll be honest, it would take me an hour, and I have no doubt I would lose every viewer that, all three of you, right? Anybody watching this video, nobody would sit through that sort of a history lesson, and I don't blame you. So I will put a pretty good text description of some of the history in the description of the video, and I'll throw some links in there if you're interested in further history. You can pursue that, and I will just give you sort of a brief rundown on why we're going to do what we're going to do here, and then we will get going and get flying. So, the China Clipper. She's a Martin M130 flying boat, the most advanced aircraft of her kind, well, the most advanced aircraft in the world, period, at this time. It is November 22nd, 1935. And we are about to launch out on the trip that inaugurates commercial air service across an ocean. It had never been done before. No large ocean, no entire ocean had ever been crossed by commercial air service. This was the first. There were a lot of people who believed it couldn't be done. And not only are we going to cross an ocean, we are going to cross the Pacific. We're going to cross the world's widest ocean at its widest point. This is what these guys did in this flying boat. Zoomed way out here so you can see the entire route. We're starting in San Francisco Bay. Going to fly to Honolulu, land in Pearl Harbor. Going to fly to a small atoll called Midway Island, land in the lagoon up there. Continue on to another atoll, Wake Island, in the very middle of the Pacific. Continue on to Guam and Manila. And the commercial air route actually continued from Manila up to Hong Kong, but it was flown by an aircraft that was owned by a Pan Am subsidiary that just flew locally here. So the large ocean-going flying clippers, they stopped in Manila and then turned around and reversed the trip. Nothing like this had ever been done before, and there were a lot of people who were very skeptical as to whether it could be done. It was a vast undertaking, not only from an aircraft engineering standpoint, but from an operational standpoint. The people who engineered the navigation techniques, the people who just engineered the bases. I mean, obviously Honolulu was a civilization. Midway Island, there wasn't anything on Midway Island. Pan Am had to build their own base on this atoll, and they did so in an area that's not really here anymore, but is up here. We'll talk more about that when we do the leg to Midway, but Midway Island, they sent a ship out here and built a base from scratch that could handle servicing an aircraft, taking care of the crew, taking care of the passengers on the stopovers. These were only mail flights for the first year or so, but then they were passenger flights as well, and there were luxury hotels on these islands. Okay, Midway Island's there, but Wake Island's even more remote and even smaller, and they built a village from scratch right up here. This flight changed the world of aviation forever. It was what gave the general public faith in commercial air travel. It was what made all the rest of the world stand up and take notice. of the American aerospace system. And it had to be a hell of an adventure to launch across this ocean. So, we're going to try to recreate that. This is something I have wanted to try to do for quite a while in Flight Simulator. But until recently, I hadn't really had the right combination of tools within Flight Simulator to be able to do this halfway historically accurately. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What else can I tell you before we get going here? You saw the route. Obviously, one of the most significant aspects to this flight, all legs of this flight, is going to be navigation. It's 1935. There are no VORs, obviously. There's no GPS, obviously. Radio direction finding is in its absolute infancy, and Pan Am pioneered a lot of it. And one thing Pan Am pioneered for these long flights was HF direction finding, HfDf or HfDf. And so I found a way to model that, and we'll talk more about that on subsequent legs, but HfDf in reality, and in the way we're going to model it in the sim, is not very reliable. It's a decent tool for zeroing in on an island when you get close, but the range that it's effective at really varies day by day because it's HF, and atmospheric conditions drastically affect it. So, dead reckoning is still our primary method of navigation across these oceans, supplemented with sextant shots and the the HfDf. As far as dead reckoning goes, we have here a navigator's log that is obviously an Excel spreadsheet, and no, I didn't make this. This was made available very generously by someone who is involved in the forums over on the A2A website. This actually was posted in the A2A Constellation forum, and it's available for download over there. And it is a self-calculating navlog. Obviously, there's a bunch of sections to it here in these tabs. I'm not going to explain to you how it all works because there's a great tutorial that comes along with it, and you don't want to hear about that. But obviously, we have a flight plan in here, and we've got our wind data in here. We've got our weight and performance data in here, and this all models the Martin M130 flying boat. And then there's a navlog section of it, and as you go, you fill out your location, and you can select one of your checkpoints from a drop-down list. But once we get going, I suspect we're going to be entering lats and longs over here that we get from our sextant shots. And the upshot is this thing will calculate a whole bunch of information for you, basically acting as your virtual navigator. And it will give you course corrections to steer to get back on course at your next checkpoint. So we're actually going to try to simulate weather deviations somewhat accurately as well, which is something, of course, the Clipper crew would not have intentionally flown through large areas of thunderstorms. They would have gone around them visually. That was the only way they had to avoid them. And so we're going to try that as well. Whenever we see weather out in front of us, we're going to deviate around it visually, and then when we can get a sextant shot and get a fix, we'll use that fix, punch it into our navlog here, and get an on-course heading. So I'm pretty excited to try this thing out. I think that this is going to make this kind of flying much more doable without having a dedicated navigator. I mean, you are the dedicated navigator, obviously, but this does a lot of the number crunching for you and saves you some time. So I'm excited to try this out. So this is one of the things that I consider a tool that finally made this flight possible. What else was I talking about? Well, obviously, we need an airplane, right? We need a good flying boat. And I looked and looked, and somebody finally pointed out to me that there is, in fact, a suitable flying boat for this trip in Flight Sim. Not only is it suitable to emulate the China Clipper, it is, in fact, the China Clipper, operated by Pan American Airways. This is a model of the Martin M130 flying boat, and it's a good model. The textures are a little low res, you can see. I mean, this is an older model. Okay, it's been around for quite a while, but the important thing is it flies well. The systems are very simple, but they are modeled pretty accurately as near as I can tell. And performance seems very spot on compared to the performance you read about the real Martin M130, and so I think this will work very well for our dead reckoning calculations. So we actually have the flying, or the China Clipper. So I'm pretty excited about that. With the China Clipper, I've installed a couple gauges. We said that celestial navigation is going to be important, so here we have a sextant. And I've made a couple videos about how to use this sextant gauge if it's something you're interested in. I'm not going to spend time talking about how it works here, but this will be a primary method of navigation for us out over the ocean at night. We'll be taking star shots, plotting the resulting lines of position, and trying to fix our position celestially. A combination of that and dead reckoning should hopefully get us to Honolulu. But after Honolulu, the targets get much smaller. Midway Island, Wake Island. And if you miss, there's nothing but open ocean out there. And so Pan Am knew that they needed a more reliable navigation system, and that's where the HfDf comes in, the radio direction finding. And it took a little work to figure out how to simulate that without making it too easy. I mean, you could just say, yeah, just tune in an NDB and follow an ADF needle, but that's not how the HfDf worked, and these guys would have killed for that level of simplicity, okay? They didn't have it. Now, I will talk more about the HfDf on subsequent legs, because we're not going to use it on this leg, but this is the radio direction finding gauge that I finally found and cobbled into the Martin M130 here. This will let us simulate radio direction finding in the same way that the Pan Am crew would have had to use it. Now, if you look at the frequency dials here, you'll notice, yes, these are NDB frequencies, okay? There's no such thing as HfDf in FSX, right? So you have to use NDBs as your radio transmitters. But as far as getting a bearing off of them, you'll see how this works on the on Lake 2. But it's pretty slick. Glad we have that. So we should be able to make these flights with a somewhat realistic level of challenge. And frankly, I'm curious to see if we even find Honolulu. Now, I said we're not going to use the HfDf to find Honolulu. Maybe just for fun, but partially because I want to test out the navlog that I'm using and sharpen up my celestial nav skills a little bit before the subsequent flights. We're going to go ahead and navigate to Honolulu based on just dead reckoning and celestial nav and see how we do making a landfall. But the legs after that we'll be using the HfDf on. Alright, I really do think that's enough babbling. If you stuck with me this long, I thank you. I didn't mean to be boring, but I figure it's necessary to set a little bit of a framework for what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, now, let's focus in specifically on Leg 1, and let's get airborne, huh? Alright. So, we are in the water just off of Alameda, California. We're in San Francisco Bay. The original Clipper departure facility was really about the center of the screen. A lot of that land, all of it that's the land class has houses on it there, you see, that's all fill. It wasn't there in 1935, and there actually was a seaplane facility right about where that white house is, right in the center of the frame. And so we'd have been pushing off from there, but as it is in today's flight sim scenery, we're here just off Alameda. It'll work just fine. So we're going to take off, head out past the Oakland Bay Bridge there, left turn out the Golden Gate as we climb, and here we go. Get on course towards top climb checkpoint, and then checkpoint 1. I've got our navlog set up. Here's our departure, using the Alameda Naval Air Station as our departure point. And I've told it that we're going to be heading for the top of climb waypoint. There's a lat long for the top of climb waypoint. And here's what it's calculated for us. So it would like us to steer 234. So once we get out the Golden Gate, that's what we'll do. It won't be exactly accurate on this first leg because we do have this little dog leg, but it'll certainly be close enough. The airplane's full of fuel. The load is set accurately. based on what the China Clipper would have been flying, or would have been carrying. Don't worry about the gyro instruments. They'll come up as soon as we add some power. You can see the suction gauge sitting down here very low with the engines idling. I've had the sim paused so we get off at the correct time. We'll go full screen now, and I think we're ready to go. And there would have been a huge bit of fanfare, fireworks, small aircraft buzzing overhead and everything, the radio announcer making speeches. Juan Tripp, the president of Pan Am, famously delivering over the radio, but live on the air as a radio address to everyone listening. He delivered Captain Ed Music's sailing orders. He famously said, "Captain Music, you have your sailing orders. Cast off and depart in accordance therewith." And that's what we'll do. They say there were about 25,000 people lining the shores of San Francisco Bay watching the departure of the China Clipper this day. Get us pointed a little bit more to the right. Only way to steer this thing is with differential power on the water. There is no water rudder. Certainly ought to get our cowl flaps open, shouldn't we? There we go, that'll do. Wind should be in front of us, and here we go. Alright, that's takeoff power. We are heavy. There is one thing I didn't mention about the departure. In reality, it took Captain Music quite a long time to get this bird off the water. She was loaded right at gross weight. Once he got her airborne, he had a heck of a time getting her out of ground effect. Shoot, I'm starting to wonder if we're going to get airborne here. Come on. Yep, she's heavy. There it is. Anyway, he had a hard time getting her out of ground effect. He made his turn to head out toward the Golden Gate, and ahead loomed the Oakland Bay Bridge, under construction at the time, but the stanchions were there, as well as the big suspension cables. Now, his plan had been to climb and go over the bridge, but he pretty quickly realized that that wasn't going to work, and so he was actually forced to fly under the unfinished Oakland Bay Bridge. And of course, just to start things off correctly, we'll have to do that as well, right? Now, the lower roadway decking wasn't there, and so Captain Music actually had a good bit more room than we do. But we'll go ahead and cruise under the Bay Bridge, just to start things off correctly. And I'll show you a picture of... There's actually pictures of the real China Clipper doing this, and it's pretty impressive. Alright, there we go. And we will resume our climb. That's enough playing around. As far as Pan Am history goes, if you see this island over here on the right, this is called Treasure Island. It's mostly man-made. It was made in 1939, so it didn't exist in 1935. But in 1939, this island was created for the World's Fair, and Pan Am moved their headquarters over here. And in reality, there's several old historic hangars here, an aviation museum you can tour. And this cove right here, which is modeled, the shoreline's modeled pretty accurately in Orbex right here, this cove to this day is called Clipper Cove, because that's where the Pan Am Clippers came in and out. That was their terminal right there. Be a neat thing to see someday. Alright, we better pull our props back a bit here, since we don't have a flight engineer to do it for us. we go. That should be about 2200 RPM. Yep, looks good. And there's the Golden Gate. We should be climbing at about 110 knots. We'll transition into a cruise climb here out over Alcatraz. I want to stay visual until we get out of here. I don't want to get in the clouds just yet. I want to know we're starting from the right point visually, so I'm not going to climb us into the clouds just yet. All right. So long, San Francisco, and I can only imagine if you were the China Clipper crew departing at this time, you were probably hoping to see this place again in 6 days. Well, 12 days, I guess, round trip. Kinda cool to see an old Martin M130 leaving the Golden Gate. That hasn't happened in a while. Alright. We are roughly on course. Let's get climbing. Go ahead and turn our Sperry autopilot on. And I will leave you now. I should have mentioned, but I would have hoped it would have been obvious. There's no way I'm going to video 17 hours of this flight. I'll change to sort of a photo slideshow and come back maybe for one intermediate video sequence where we can talk about how the flight's progressing, and then I'll do a video sequence for the arrival as well. So we'll time compress all the rest of this. Alright, I'm going to start filling out my navlog, and I will see you halfway across the Pacific. Here's the original China Clipper crew boarding during the departure ceremony in 1935. The China Clipper over downtown San Francisco. The China Clipper heading out the Golden Gate with an unfinished Golden Gate Bridge in the background. a common view for the first couple hours. I couldn't get any celestial shots because of the clouds. Alright folks, welcome back. We're a little more than halfway. I'm just taking a second star shot for a fix for somewhere near checkpoint 10. We're shooting Sirius, and this is for a course line. Had to adjust a few notches on the elevation, so I would say we are a little bit off course, but not too bad, I don't think. Also taking this fix just maybe a couple minutes earlier than I was anticipating to be at checkpoint 10, but that's because I'm starting to see some lightning up ahead. I'll show you the map and talk about the progress of the flight so far, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that lightning situation and why I decided to take this shot early. I'll tell you what, when you're stuck down at 7,000 or 9,000, I finally managed to step climb up to 10,000 feet. Taking celestial fixes down here is a whole nother ballgame. You have to get them when you can. Alright. So, minus 20 offset. I'll leave the course alone for now and just let it keep flying, and let's plot these out here. One thing is nice though, when you're only doing 115 knots indicated, you don't have to worry about advancing position lines for a minute or two. Alright, so the first star we shot was Menkar. Plus 5 offset, 240 degree azimuth. I have a feeling I consistently worry about getting these a lot more accurate than they need to be. Close enough. Plus 5 offset, 240 degree azimuth. Which means we need a line of position of about 150 degrees. Alright, save that, make it green. Second LOP is a minus 20 offset from 153. That means measure 333 for 20 miles. Miles, 330 degree course. Right about there. Let's see, it should be a 063 LOP. Something like that. We'll save it, make it green. Alright, shows us a little fast and north of course, maybe even a little further north of course than we were. What is that, about, well, yeah, that's about 20 miles north of course, isn't it? I didn't make enough of a left correction. However, this was a good fix, and this is a good fix. So whatever we get for this navlog that I'm using should calculate a good on-course heading. We'll aim for maybe checkpoint 12. I'm going to do that right now, as a matter of fact, while I'm talking to you, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the progress of the flight. Let's put a marker there. And I've been using diamond markers. For consistency, we'll do that. We are located somewhere over there. We'll call this 1054. I'm going to zoom way in, get rid of the measurement here. Try to put it as close as we can to the intersection of those two lines, right about there. Alright, then, since this self-calculating navlog that I'm using likes degrees, minutes, and seconds, we'll change to that format, and we will read our position. And you won't be able to see me do this because I'm doing it on a different computer, but I will certainly tell you what it says. North, 28, 39, 18. West, 146, 37, 22. .146, 37, 22, yes. And we'll call it 1054. Still 4 degrees, we're still at 10,000 feet. We're still indicating 118 knots. Still doing 144 true. Calculating a ground speed of 154. And there's the tailwind finally. We were supposed to get a tailwind for the second half of the flight here, just based on what the winds were doing in Honolulu. I knew it was going to sure do a tailwind at some point, and it looks like it finally has. Tell you what, because we're already past waypoint 10 a little bit, I'm going to correct. I don't want to make a drastic correction for checkpoint 11, so I'm going to ask it to give me an on-course heading for checkpoint 12, and we're going to try to aim for checkpoint 12. Alright, and our navlog says that we should steer 219 degrees to head for checkpoint 12. That seems like a drastic left turn, I'll be honest with you. I get in trouble when I second guess this stuff. Okay, but we're going to try it this time. We're going to try it this time. Alright. Our super handy Sperry autopilot is steering 219 degrees. How are we doing up ahead? A little bit of lightning in the distance. We'll see if it's worth deviating around again. Alright. Now that the housekeeping chores are finished up, let's talk about the flight's progress so far. Last time I talked to you, we were leaving the Golden Gate in San Francisco, and I was fully expecting not to see land again until we coasted in the Hawaiian Islands. Imagine my surprise to look out the right window about 15 minutes down the road and see islands. I forgot about the Farallones. There are the Farallones, and we did cruise roughly by them visually, I can tell you that. Somewhere approaching checkpoint 1, we started to see a large area of lightning ahead, and because I talked about this self-calculating navlog, because I have this thing, and it is easing my workload a bit as far as solving off-course problems, I decided to treat weather realistically the way the Clipper cruise would have, and deviate visually around areas of thunderstorms. Since lightning is the best indication I have in active sky here as far as thunderstorms, I decided to deviate around them here. I started getting off course. Ended up about 30 miles south of course. Paralleled course for a while. Started getting back onto course here. Then the wind shifted. This was a wind shift. I didn't change course much from here to here, but the wind shifted, and I got knocked way south of course again. Then I veered north of course, correcting. Stayed north of course, this was the one we just took, and now we're aiming back for checkpoint 12. We have been in the air now for, let me do some math here, about 11 hours and 20 minutes we've been in the air. And looks to me like we've got about another 7 hours to run, which will put us in a couple hours earlier than the actual China Clipper crew arrived in Honolulu on that maiden flight. But it was noted that they had stronger than forecast headwinds the whole way. And our headwinds haven't been too bad, and now, as a matter of fact, we have a tailwind. So I think we're going to beat them by a couple hours. Talked a little bit about the challenges of getting celestial fixes down here at 10,000 feet. So one thing you'll notice is I did start out, I got a good celestial fix near checkpoint 1. But you'll notice I didn't really get a celestial fix anywhere near checkpoint 2. It's basically between 2 and 3. Well, I started trying to get the fix when the time said I should be a beam checkpoint 2. This was when I finally got it. The clouds, and I was stuck down at 7,000 feet here as well, the clouds make getting these shots difficult. And so basically, I've learned you have to get them when you can, which is not really, it doesn't always correlate with when you want them. And this is a challenge the actual navigators would have dealt with. This one, you can see the red line was the actual star shot I got. But then 20 minutes elapsed before I was able to get a second one for a fix. And so I plotted the first shot I took, then advanced it forward in time 20 minutes. And that's this line here. And then this was my course shot. And I had to do that again here. So I've done some advancing of lines of position here. Overall, so far, this has been a real challenge. I do think we're roughly on course, though. It doesn't look like there's a whole bunch of weather out in front of us there. I'm not going to make a course change for a few bolts of lightning. So we'll keep flying this 219 heading. And maybe I'll come back and do one more video segment, maybe in the last couple checkpoints here. I'll certainly give you some more screenshots along the way, and we'll definitely be back to talk about Coast In when we get land in sight, and we'll film the arrival into Pearl Harbor. My plan right now is to swing around the south side of the island. We'll go past Cocoa Head, we'll go past Diamond Head, we'll cruise past Waikiki, we'll cruise past the Honolulu International Airport, which of course would not have been there in 1935, but it is there in the simulator. And we'll enter Pearl Harbor here, fly over Ford Island, probably land somewhere in East Lock, and I'll show you where the Clippers originally docked. You can actually see the old dock on Google Earth yet, though it is not, unfortunately, there in the sim. But, alright, making progress. Making progress. Talk to you soon. Alright folks, welcome back. We are, according to my calculations, only about 25 minutes out from Honolulu. As you can see, it's still dark and we're in the weather. Unfortunately, even though I've slowed down, our favorable winds means we're going to arrive almost 3.5 hours earlier than the original Clipper crew did, and that means, well, right now it's showing we'll be there about 20 minutes before sunrise. Now what I was planning on doing is finding the island and flying around the south end of it, taking a look at Cocoa Head, flying down Waikiki Beach, past Diamond Head, and into Pearl Harbor. I mentioned I'd show you where the original Clipper moored. Into Pearl Harbor, this is Ford Island. This peninsula right here on the north end of Pearl Harbor is called Pearl City. And if you see this dock on the west side of Pearl City right here, this derelict dock with vegetation growing out of it, this is the Pan Am dock. It's still there. This is where the Pan Am Clipper's moored. And you'll see if you zoom way in, a couple user pictures become visible here. And one of them says China Clipper Pier. If you take a look at it, that's the picture of the pier. And I thought there was a second picture of... Uh-oh. There's a plaque. And... well, there was a picture of the plaque that talks about the 75th anniversary, I think, or 50th anniversary. Shoot! Oh well. There is a plaque there, trust me, and that's the original pier on the west side of the Pearl City Peninsula. So we'll probably land somewhere in East Lock. The Clipper cruise always planned on not arriving until after sunrise, unless there was an emergency. So if we have to, we'll circle outside of Pearl Harbor. The problem, though, is it's about time to start our descent. You can see we're in the clouds, so even if it is starting to get light out, we can't see anything. And we would sure not want to overfly Oahu, so we better start down. Thinking about how to do this. Okay, let's turn the autopilot off. We'll turn it back on for heading hold, and then we should be able to use the Sperry autopilot and pitch down a few degrees. And that should start us descending. I slowed down. I was holding 115 knots. And I slowed down to about 90. I didn't want to fly much slower than that with the weather in the area. But I'm trying not to arrive early. There we go. We'll try to get down below the base of the clouds here and see if we can find an island. I know that I said that I was going to try to do this realistically and deviate around weather, and I have been, but and I think this is probably somewhat true to life with the original Clipper cruise as well. I don't think they would have allowed a weather deviation to create the risk of missing the island they were looking for, because that has more serious ramifications. I think they would have ducked down below the base of the clouds and tried to visually navigate around the worst of it while remaining mostly on course. And so that's what we're doing as well. Come on, start descending. Yeah, according to my nav log, we were going to arrive at 6:21, and so you see we're getting close. You know, I was hoping for better weather, and I was hoping that it would be daylight and we'd be able to see some of the islands more off to the south here. Either the Big Island way down here, or at least Maui or Molokai as we get closer. There are a couple NDBs, of course, on Oahu. I'm trying to do this as realistically as possible. Now, the Clipper cruise, we talked about the HfDf. They did have that. It was temperamental, but by now I'm sure they'd be getting decent fixes. So we could simulate that by tuning in an NDB. There is an NDB out here at Kaneohe Marine Corps Naval Air Station, or Marine Corps Air Station, so what that is. Anyway, we could tune that in, but what the heck, let's see if our dead reckoning works, shall we? Now, if we get desperate, we certainly will tune in a radio nav aid. As you can see, we're down to about 20% gas, so we won't fly around all day out here. Any hint of dawn in the sky behind us yet? Anything at all? Boy, no, it's pretty dark yet. Well, we'll see. Coming out of about 7,300 feet. I wanted to level off about 5,000 feet, but I'll keep taking us on down, get us below the base of the clouds, and see if we can't find an island. Be back with you when we hopefully find something. Alright folks, welcome back. We are level down here at 2,000 feet, still holding our heading. Got us slowed back about as much as I want to. The weather's really not good at all. This is how far we had to come down to be consistently below the clouds, but we're still not entirely below them. I think I'm starting to see the barest glimmer of dawn out there, but I think visibility's poor, and theoretically there's an island in front of us. I didn't think we'd miss Oahu after the last couple good fixes I got. I thought our course would would have us pointed at the island here, so I'm really hoping that we're going to see some land in the next few minutes. You can see it's coming up on 6:15. Yeah, I think we're just getting the barest glimmer of some dawn, but well, where the heck is Oahu? Well, now see, is that terrain, or is that the base of the clouds? It's too dark to tell yet. This is the problem with making landfall in the dark, but you know what? That's a fairly well-defined line right there all of a sudden. Is that? I don't know. Could be the horizon and clouds. Really can't say yet. Guess maybe I brought you guys back a little prematurely. Cloud edges or terrain? And this is a realistic challenge, you know. When you read stories about the guys that did this stuff, they definitely talked about not wanting to arrive at night. Let's pick it up a little bit, shall we? Time accelerate just 2 times. I would like to get the landfall moment on video with you guys. It's too dark to even tell, and the weather's poor enough to even for it to be difficult to tell which island we find if we find one. But the plan will be to make a turn around the follow the left shore of it, or the make a left turn and follow the shore of it. Like I said, we'll try to circle around the south side. Okay, cloud or the north side of an island. What is that? And you can see we're starting to get a little bit of color in the sky, so dawn's definitely finally breaking here. Looks like the weather's improved a little bit, and boy, I think that's an island. That is a shoreline, guys. There we go. Land ho. That has got to be the north shore of Oahu right there. So we were a little north, of course. Well, there you go. That's coast in. There is Oahu. We got some city lights up here. There is a city on the north side of Oahu. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know that side of the island. We said we'd come around the south side, though, so let's do it. Let's make a left turn. Land ho at about 6:18. Not bad. Not bad. Boy, this Sperry autopilot is cantankerous, isn't it? Alright, that's the north side of the island in the bay. I was looking at the weather. I should have mentioned I'm running Orbex Global and Orbex Vector, so coastline should be accurate. I'm not, however, running any specific Hawaii scenery, so I'm not sure how good the terrain will look. I'm not running any mesh or anything. So if we came in up here, if that's what we were looking at, was that Kahuku we were looking at? Or were we looking at the north point of you know, of this here, and did we just turn and come down this way? Yeah, I'm really not sure. Really hard to say. We'll see if we can see an airport off the right here. Definitely getting some city lights, but I'm not seeing an airport, so we're flying to the southeast. Does that make sense? Well, it does, yeah. Yeah, Kaneohe Bay should be a very good landmark if we can find this and the lights of the. I assume the Marine Corps Air Station is there in the flight sim scenery. Of course, it wouldn't have been there in 1935, and for that matter, nor would most of these city lights, which is why you really wouldn't want to be trying to arrive here before dark. Alright, though. Got a little point with an island off of it that we're just passing a beam right now. Does that make sense, north of Kaneohe Bay? Boy, if we were way up here. Lai. You know, this could be it right here. We could be way up here. Okay. Well, if that's the case, following the shoreline should bring us to Kaneohe Bay pretty quickly. Hey, look at some flashing lights off the nose. I bet that's the Kaneohe Bay Marine Corps Air Station. Alright, well, we found Honolulu, and I'll tell you, we found Oahu anyway, and I'll tell you what, straight line distance, our original estimate from flight planning, I think, would only have been off by about 10 minutes. And the last fix I got would have put us basically right on. So once again, Dead Reckoning works, and the fact that it works as well as it does in Flight Simulator just amazes me. And yes, I still have time acceleration cooking here, because why not? It's going to take us a little while to fly around this entire island. So here's a bay just off the right. Probably right here, because we are pointed right at Kaneohe Bay. Well, now we're going to fly over Bellows Air Force Station. I didn't even know that was there. What the heck is this? Is this still here? No, this looks like a defunct field. We'll see if it's in the flight sim scenery. I didn't even know that was there. Hasn't been a Martin M130 flying over Hawaii in quite a while, has there? That was pretty cool. That landfall was pretty sketchy. I was expecting something a little bit easier than that, I'll be honest with you. I was expecting better weather, better visibility, daylight, and I was expecting to see the islands from a long ways off. Looks to me like we have a pretty good left crosswind here. Sailboat down there. I guess that's the Marine Corps Air Station there. This is probably Kaneohe Bay we're flying over right now. Keep us back at 90 knots here, so we'll have good daylight by the time we get to Pearl Harbor. That'll work. That will work. That'll shape it up to be a nice morning. Alright. I'll bring you folks back when we're rounding Cocoa Head and heading towards Diamond Head, and that'll be the final video segment. See you in a bit. Alright folks, as promised, welcome back. We're just rounding the southeast corner of Oahu here. This is Cocoa Head. and just the other side of that bay there is the Coco Crater. And the terrain was actually fairly accurate. I'm impressed considering I'm not running any mesh products for Hawaii. So we're just leaving Coco Head there. There is a VOR down there, but of course not in 1935. And up ahead, we have Diamond Head and downtown Honolulu, which again would have been quite a bit less impressive in 1935, but there certainly would have been some buildings there. I'm going to go ahead and start easing us on down here a little bit. Turn some carb heat on. Dawn's progressing nicely. We'll certainly have enough daylight to land once we get into Pearl Harbor. We'll fly by Diamond Head. We'll fly by Waikiki. We'll fly by the Honolulu International Airport, which you can see the lights flashing up there, and of course that wasn't there in 1935 either. We'll apparently fly by a whole bunch of cruise ships in port in Honolulu. I suppose that would have looked a little different in 1935 as well. One thing we ought to do is see what the wind is doing in Honolulu, or here's close enough. Well, Hickam would have worked too. 062 at 12. So we'll stick with our plan of landing in East Lock, and we'll land to the east in East Lock, Pearl Harbor. We'll hop over to the first officer's seat for a little better view here. Here's Diamond Head. That's the crater of Diamond Head. Of course, in reality, it's not filled in with houses. That's the generic land class. But you can definitely see the crater. That's pretty cool. That's better, actually, than I thought it would be. Go ahead and make a little bit of a right turn here. Turn than I wanted, but this Sperry autopilot's going to oscillate all over the place, so we'll see where it settles out. Alright, so there's Diamond Head. Once we get a little further down the road here and we look back, you'll see the more familiar silhouette of Diamond Head, because every picture you've ever seen of it is taken from Waikiki Beach, which is right there. So this is the Waikiki area. This is all Waikiki Beach right here. This is the main, very famous area of Waikiki Beach right here. There's a little lagoon that exists actually right in front of a famous hotel right there. I'm not sure which one it is, but yeah, that lagoon's really there. There's a lighthouse. This is a marina. This is the canal that comes in through downtown Honolulu. Ala Drive crosses it right there. This is a really nice beach park with a swimming lagoon in it. And apparently this is a port where cruise ships anchor. Did not know that. The main commercial port is right up here. And there's the Honolulu International Airport. Of course, we do know that that would not have been there in 1935, but frankly, I have done a little modification of AFCADs for some of these scenery locations further down the line, but Honolulu is just too complex to really be worth messing with, so. Alright, there is Coco Head in the background under the mouse pointer, if I've got it turned on there. And then in the foreground right here, this point, is Diamond Head, as seen typically from over by Waikiki. So, Honolulu International Airport. This is called the Reef Runway out here because they built most of it on a reef. And this lagoon over here is actually charted water runways, because when they quit using Pearl Harbor as the seaplane landing base, commercial seaplane operations were still a thing out here for quite a while, and so there's a long water runway right there, and there's another east-west one right here, and they're charted on the charts. But that is all very much post-1935. Hickam Air Force Base is over here, and they use the same runways as the Honolulu International Airport, but that's the Hickam Air Force Base there, which, again, post-1935, I think. Actually, I'm not sure about that one. But now as we get in towards Pearl Harbor, I'll show you what I do know was there in 1935. This is the entrance to Pearl Harbor right here. So we're going to fly up here, we're going to turn to the right, fly right into Pearl Harbor. We'll take a look at Ford Island. I'll point out Battleship Row. I'll point out the Pearl City Peninsula and the area where the Pan Am dock was. Of course, the Pan Am dock is not there in the flight sim scenery, but there's still a prominent sort of a point that sticks out into the water there. That is what the Pan Am dock is built on, and I'm guessing this is part of Orbeck's vector. When they modeled the shoreline of Pearl Harbor, they didn't put in the dock, the old remnant dock there, but they did put in that point, and so you can actually see where the Pan Am mooring facility was here on Pearl City, which is cool. I imagine most people would never know what to look for, but if you do, and you compare it to the old decrepit dock you can see in Google Earth, you can actually see it here in the shoreline in Flight Sim. It's pretty neat. Alright. This is perfect. Got plenty of light. Tell you what I'm going to do is turn off my landing light, which I would be inclined to leave on for visibility, but it creates weird glare on the water here. It's some combination of scenery I have installed, so we'll just turn that off. We don't need it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the autopilot off at this point, because it's, frankly, easier to fly this thing than fight with the Sperry autopilot. Although, it's not actually very easy to fly this thing either. Watch this. You can see the first officer's control yoke there. I have no idea why that popped up. Basically, that's full-scale aileron deflection right there, and this is the roll rate you get. It's not the most maneuverable thing. It is a big old pig is what it is. And, you know, it certainly looks like it may have been. I have no idea how a Martin M130 flew, and neither do very few people that are still alive these days, so I will not complain about how the folks that gave us this nice freeware airplane actually modeled the flight characteristics, because frankly it's very smooth and actually pleasant to fly. It's just very unresponsive. It takes large control inputs. Alright, here we are, cruising on up Pearl Harbor. Entrance to Pearl Harbor right here. Doesn't get too much more historic in terms of Pacific aviation, does it? For good and bad reasons. So here you have West Lock over here. This is called Middle Lock right up here, and that's these days the Navy uses it to anchor ships just kind of for storage, so that's why there's some naval ships up there. Here's the interesting stuff. Boy, we do have a pretty good right crosswind. This is Ford Island here in the center of Pearl Harbor, just to the right of the nose, and the middle of it is all pavement. There's a naval air station there. That is, well, there was. It's closed now. And to tell you the truth, there may have actually been some sort of landing facility there in 1935. I'm not sure, because I know in 1939 there was, when Amelia Earhart started her around the world flight. The first time she attempted to start that flight, she tried to take off from Ford Island here in Pearl Harbor and crashed on takeoff because the airplane was way over gross, and the repairs took a while, and when she started again, she started out going eastbound instead of westbound. Her original plan was to go westbound. So anyway, there was some sort of field there in 1939. Can't tell you about 1935. Along the east side of Ford Island here, though, you can see some old hangars, old seaplane hangars. Some of those would have been there in 1935. This right here, the east shore of Ford Island, well, southeast shore, this was Battleship Row. So this was the area that the Pearl Harbor attack of December 7th, 1941 was focused right here on the Pacific Fleet, all moored at Battleship Row. And in our modern-day flight simulator scenery, we've got the Arizona Memorial right there, and that's the USS Missouri Memorial right there. Straight ahead is the peninsula, the Pearl City Peninsula. What we're going to do is make a right turn and land in front of it here to the east, into East Lock. But I will show you one more interesting thing as we start our right turn in here. just off the nose, right now sliding to the left of the nose. On the left shore of the Pearl City Peninsula, you can see a little prominent point sticking out right there. I'm circling with the mouse cursor. That is the old Pearl City Pan Am facility. That's where the dock is, and so that's where we intend to end up. They say you should final this thing about 80 knots, and that does seem to work pretty well. I've only made 1 or 2 landings in it, just testing it out, so we'll see how this works. But like I said, she behaves pretty nicely, very smooth. All right, good morning, Honolulu. Couple hours early. This'll work. We certainly beat the original China Clipper crew by a couple hours. There are no wing flaps on this thing, by the way, which is funny because the earlier flying boat that Pan Am flew, the S-42, had wing flaps. The Martin M130 did not, so all you do is come on down here, I'll carry a little power through the landing, and we'll just brush her on. There we go. Alright, touchdown at 6:56 local time, Pearl Harbor. Welcome to paradise. And now what? That is an interesting point. This aircraft doesn't have water rudders. The real Martin M130 didn't either. Other than differential power and whatever effectiveness you can get out of your regular rudder, there actually isn't any way to steer this thing on the water. And there's not supposed to be. The Clippers, once they ended up in their lagoon, really became barges. A tender would run out here, and the crew would climb through a hatch in the nose, which I don't know if that's modeled here. Let's see. Well, they would climb out here somehow, and they would pass lines to the tender. And I believe that this hook right here on the top, I believe that was something involved in towing the aircraft. And the tender would take the aircraft in tow. Once the Clipper crew was tied up to the tender, they'd shut their engines down, and they would be towed in as a barge to the mooring facility. And so I am going to simulate that. We'll get a few pictures of her over there, moored where she ought to be, over by Pearl City. And then I will come back with one more video segment, and we'll do a little analysis and debrief of Leg 1 of our flight. Talk about what we learned, what we can apply for Leg 2. Alright folks, Final video segment of leg one here, just a little analysis and post-flight debrief, which is something the real Clipper crew probably would have done as well, though I imagine they would have been pretty tired after 20 minutes or 20 hours in the air, huh? Anyway, you've seen the chart already. You know what we flew. We'll get into analyzing the track here a little bit. But in general, success. San Francisco to Pearl Harbor. As far as the vital stats of the flight go, compared to the original Clipper crew, we were 3 hours and 23 minutes earlier than they were, just due to the winds differences. We touched down in East Lock at 6:56 a.m. Hawaii time. That's 16:56 Zulu. Our flight planner was predicting that we would touch down at, Our flight planner was predicting that we would arrive at 16:12. Now, this was what we planned before takeoff. I think we would have been much closer to this if we hadn't flown around the island. Remember, we made landfall on the northeast side of Oahu up here somewhere, and we flew around the whole south side of the island up into Pearl Harbor. The last calculation that our navlog did, and I'll talk a little more about the navlog in a minute, but I'll tell you what, this thing did a great job. The last calculation it did for our final run to Ford Island here, it calculated that we'd be arriving at 16:25 Zulu. And if we'd flown straight across the island instead of around the island, I actually think that was about right on. We would have been there about 16:25. That's only 13 minutes late over our original flight plan. And that's after 17 plus hours in the air. That's pretty decent flight planning. I'll take that as a win. As far as the flight planner goes, this is a great tool. We talked a little bit about it in the beginning of the flight, and here it is a little more filled out. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but it did its job. It did fantastic. Here's all the notes I made on the course corrections I made for weather along the way. But you'll notice that I didn't use very many pre-computed positions after top of climb. I started entering the actual lat longs that I calculated from Celestial Fixes, and I let it calculate the course to steer to the next waypoint. I would select the next waypoint, and it would calculate the course to steer, and I would do it, and it worked out really well. So this thing makes on-the-fly, off-course calculation corrections really as low workload as they could be. This is a really cool tool. Even got a little logbook entry at the end here. Indicates we blocked 17 hours and 25 minutes. So, we beat the original Clipper crew by 3 hours and 23 minutes. Per our original flight planning, we were 13 minutes late. We landed with 617 gallons of gas on board. That's 204 gallons more than we planned, so we were a little bit fat on gas. That worked out just fine. And I will definitely be using this flight planner going forward for any sort of classic flying that I do in the sim. This is a really cool tool. Alright, let's do a little course analysis. You've seen the line, you've seen our celestial calculations already. Remember, the yellow line is our course line that we plotted. The green lines are celestial lines of position. So where the green lines cross is where I calculated our position fixes to be. The red lines, I think I talked about before, are where I had to advance a line of position. This was the line of position I actually shot from the star. But by the time I got the second shot, we were 10, 20 minutes down the road, so I advanced the first line of position to the same time as the second to get a more accurate fix. Now let's take a look. I was running a flight tracker recorder, and here is our track. And roughly we did what we thought we did. Came out of the Golden Gate, made a left correction for weather, continued to correct left for weather, got a pretty good first fix, started correcting back on course, got a moderately good 3-star fix, continued to correct back onto course, got back near course, paralleled course for a while. Decent fix here, decent fix here. decent fix here. We were definitely south of course. Made the course correction calculated for us by our self-calculating navlog. Put us right back about on our course. Not too bad. Now I continued on that heading for a while longer till I got another position fix. I got one. I think here I chose to continue on the original, or on the course I was flying till I got a second fix for confirmation. Got one, showed us north of course. Here's our course correction back south. We were aiming for checkpoint 12. We darn near hit it right on. Turned to parallel course just fine. Paralleling course just fine. Got a shot showing us a little south of course. Made a correction, made a little too much of a correction. Got a shot that showed us about on course. Turned to parallel course, but not quite. And we kept diverging just a little bit to the north. Maybe the winds shifted on us a little bit. What ended up happening was, as you remember, we darn near missed Oahu. We caught the northeastern corner of it. Flew around the island, landed Pearl Harbor. So the problem here, or the takeaway for me here, I think, is that I got a little bit complacent about shooting another celestial fix. And I think, I know we were in the weather here, but I don't remember, I don't think I even tried to get another celestial fix, and I probably should have tried to get a checkpoint 15 fix. I just, I had it in my head that landfall in Oahu wouldn't be difficult. I wasn't expecting a low visibility situation. I was not expecting to arrive in the dark. You know, the weather's usually good out here, and I was expecting to arrive several hours after sunrise. I was expecting to see Molokai or Maui or maybe even the big mountains down here, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, from, you know, out here somewhere. If we'd missed Oahu in the low vis and wandered out here somewhere, well, that could have been interesting. So what could we have done to make this better? Well, we could have tried to get another celestial fix. We also could have tuned in the radio direction finder that we talked about, the HfDf. Certainly the original Clipper crew would have been using that. They wouldn't be leaving any of this to chance. I just thought I'd try to challenge myself a little bit. Almost bit me. But that's okay. We will be incorporating the radio DF stuff going forward because we're going to start attempting to hit very small islands from here on out. So overall, leg 1, I'll call that a success. I'm happy with it. Certainly learned a few things. And here's a tease, if anyone's interested, in leg 2. Honolulu to Wake Island. Now, Wake Island, you'll see, is just one little atoll out here. And so, land in the lagoon. This was the Pan Am facility up here. Obviously, a smaller target to hit, but this was actually known as one of the easiest legs, navigationally speaking, of the trip, because you see you have a whole string of small islands here, the northwestern Hawaiian Islands to follow. You've got Nihoa, Necker Island, French Frigate Shoals, Gardner Pinnacles, Morrow Reef, Laysan Island, Litsiansky Island. You pass Pearl and Hermes Atoll on into Wake. But you know what? I think we'll plan on using the HfDf to find Wake anyway. But we'll back it up with Dead Reckoning, absolutely, as well as visual shots on the islands and celestial shots. This is a daytime flight, so we'll be able to see the islands, and they're actually all there. I did verify that in Flight Sim Scenery. They're all there. So they will be visual landmarks, and we'll take sun shots as well, and it'll at least give us ground speed checks along the way. And take me a little bit to plan that one and get back to it, but if anyone's interested, I'll document it, and we'll keep this adventure going. But that'll about do it for leg 1. China Clipper. San Francisco to Honolulu in the books. Thanks for coming along.